Hello, and welcome to another episode of Anomalies, a show about things that I used to think were kind of not so mainstream, but I think they are. They're becoming more and more mainstream. I've got my buddy Dave Jinks here with me, who's got a really interesting backdrop. Why did you choose that backdrop, Dave?
Oh, so I can say I've got the whole world in my hand right
Okay, I
there.
thought that
If we're if we're including video, people will get the joke, but if we're not, that's kind of lost in everyone. But the pyramid, I mean, who doesn't like the great
pyramid.
pyramids of Egypt?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like it.
Just
So I
looking at
also,
them, wondering about the history contained in this thing. I mean, like millennia and
yes.
probably beyond. I think it's much more than just 2 to 3, which is what the mainstream version is. But I can't look at the pyramids enough. And with the earth here, that puts things in perspective. So I kind of love it. Also, it's on the moon, I believe. So it's photoshopped.
And you're a moon kind of guy too.
Yes, I'm fascinated with the moon, and I'm hoping our guest today will talk a little bit about the moon also, and what she thinks may be there, and what
We're fortunate to have somebody who is a repeat guest
hmm.
for us. We don't have a whole lot of repeat guests, but Karen A. Dahlman, who has been on our show before, talked about Ouija, is back with us, and we're really glad to see her. Karen, you just moved, right? Did you move?
I did. I just moved to sunny Arizona and still kind of moving in and getting settled. But yeah, I did. I moved and I'm happy to be here.
The only thing I can think of when I think of Arizona, of course, Dave and I live in Olympia, Washington, which is probably a little different than Arizona. The only thing I can think of as far as Arizona is concerned is the summer. And I imagine people walking down the street in the heat and then just combusting, spontaneous combustion, just blowing up. So I think that would probably keep me
Well,
out of
that's coming from people who live in an area with their average temperature is like 54 degrees.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Anything over 70 is like will melt your face in our region. But you moved from where, Karen?
I was in Southern Cal before, which is a little cooler, but still, yeah. So, and I love the desert, you guys. I'm actually originally, I shouldn't say I'm from, but I spent many years in New Mexico, so I'm kind of used to the desert. They don't have the extreme heat that we have here in Arizona, but I love the heat, you guys. It might sound weird, but I like it. And this is the deal. You don't walk down the street when it's 110, 120
Right.
in the middle of the day. Okay. You save your outside time for early morning. I love early morning hikes. And out here, it's spectacular. We're talking about hitting the trail at 5:36 in the summertime. So when you're done hiking 2 hours later, it's only like 80 degrees, which isn't bad. 80 here is not really hot. It's when it gets to 110, 120, that's hot. Then you use your swimming pool. Then you get your pool, but you have air conditioning, you guys. It all works lovely. Imagine
Well,
that.
you're happy there, so that's the main thing.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, so we were talking before the show started. We're like, what do you want to talk about? Because we've talked a lot about Ouija boards. That was our last show, but I think with Karen, there are a lot of other dimensions. So I'm just going to prompt her to start something, start a conversation about something. And it could be related to Ouija, it could be related to cryptids. You just start, and then we'll tag along behind you.
Yeah, we'll see where we go with this conversation. I was talking to you earlier. A lot of people think that when you use a Ouija board, that it's just for communicating with the deceased, who I would call the transition, because when you die, what we call death is really life after life after life. Now, I know we discussed this on the last show, but what people don't really understand is that once you start going down this rabbit hole of consciousness, meaning connecting with sentience, that's not in this dimension. We'll start with the transition first. You can also, as you start realizing, you can expand that awareness into other types of sentience. So you can connect with sentient beings that are in between dimensions. So we could talk about intradimensionals, extradimensionals. We can talk about extraterrestrials, those that are maybe on the moon or other planets. We can talk about cryptids as long as they exist. We can talk about even characters that might have existed in our past, but we no longer recognize them as being part of our present day, such as dragoons. They like to be called dragoons, not dragons, or maybe mermaids or something of that nature, or even the giants. So, and you're not stuck to just the dimension of Earth. You can also communicate with other beings and other planets. So what happens is, I know how crazy this may sound to some people, but once you learn to use this tool and make contact, what you can do is expand it into so many other areas, including even exploring your own inner self, greater self, what I like to call the higher self. So there's so many different directions you can go with this great cosmic phone, a universal cosmic phone that I like to call this tool, the Ouija board.
Yeah, I think that's a great description, a universal cosmic phone. I think that's a more benign way to talk about Ouija boards. I know some people are kind of freaked out about them.
Yeah, and
Well,
Dan,
yeah.
before I lose this train of thought, because this is, as you know, this is one of my most favorite ever, getting to the cosmic phone. We have a new buzzword for that. Our last guest, we talked quite a bit about the so-called Akashic record, the Akashic records, the idea that there's a universal library where experiences of all beings, not just humans, but animals, insects, consciousness of all types is stored potentially, and and again, if you have the right library card, you have the right access, you could potentially live another person's life, or you could check out the book, so to speak. So I want to ask Karen, first of all, if that's kind of your feeling about what you're calling into, what you're tapping into on your cosmic phone here. Is that the concept that you like?
Well, I don't necessarily call it Akashic records, but I understand Akashic records really well. And I did some work with that when I was doing past life therapy, as well as hypnosis on myself and also with clients. But I will say this, I like to keep it even larger explanation than that, because the Akashic records is like everything that would happen or could happen, and all the beings in it, but it makes it seem like you're going to a place, like a space where it's, and we use the analogy of like a library or consortium or some kind of place. And I like to think of this as, it's not contained in any place. It's just a matter of our desire, dialing up the frequency of that which you want to communicate with. So you could technically pull up information like the Akashic record does, or you can also just have communications with other beings. So I don't really put those two together in my world, but if people do, that might help them understand how this technique works, or how I'm able to do that, access all this different information, because people have a basis or understanding of the Akashic records. So I see that there's sentience around us. The world is alive. When I say the world, I'm also including the universe, other galaxies, other planets, and into infinity. Everything is alive. And when something has an aliveness about it, an awareness about it, that becomes their consciousness. You can tap that by directing your own consciousness to reach it. It has to go through desires. Number one, your beliefs, your desires, which becomes your intentions, and then you can tap it. But unless people have a belief that they can do this, they will never do it. They'll shut themselves down. So it's always takes a progression of being able to reach maybe the deceased first, or maybe some information from the afterlife first. And then you start moving into, well, maybe I can also communicate with the animals. But then I don't want this to be stuck and relegated to just saying, deceased animal, transitioned animal. No, I'm talking about animals that are very much alive in our dimension, like your pets. Or going back to what we said earlier, the cryptids, such as other beings that exist. Maybe they're interdimensional. So yeah, I hate to get just confined into saying, it's like the Akashic records, because I also don't want to be blasphemous to people's beliefs about the Akashic records. I know there's a whole belief system around that. So, but yeah, I mean, if that helps people to understand it, fine. But I like to even go beyond that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think of it the way that you're describing it, as just universal consciousness that you can tap into in various different ways. You happen to use the Ouija board, as your primary, but I also know that you have other talents too, because I've utilized them a couple times.
That's right.
And
That's right.
You said some things that were extraordinary to me. And in fact, I'm going to say right now that Karen is the one who who convinced me once and for all that all this stuff is real, I have to say. So maybe that's the equivalent of a 5-star review of what she provides. Because,
Listen, I'll take it.
Yeah, I don't think she'll refuse
I mean,
that.
if you're on Yelp or something, I'd be glad to go there and actually give you a 5-star rating. But the point is that you can access this, whatever it is, you call it a library or record or just the universal consciousness.
Yes.
I agree. But what Karen's making a distinction between is that general idea and the very specific idea of Akashic records. And so I agree. We don't want to step on anyone's beliefs here. I'm just using as a general thing. So yeah.
Or I guess this, I don't want to contain it either or put it into a box.
Right.
I try really hard to keep talking about infinite possibilities, infinite worlds, infinite, because this is when I started doing this work, I thought like we talked about last time, and most people believe the Ouija board is for bringing in spirits like of the transitioned or afterlife or demons or ghosts. It's so beyond that. And it wasn't until I experienced the board at a young age, until it took me about 15 years till I got to the level of being able to start tapping other consciousness. And then I've been using it for 49 years now, you guys. In the last, those many years, 30 plus years here, I really was pushing boundaries of consciousness and going beyond what I even thought was possible. And when I did that, I was met with great, great awarenesses that would come forward and start communicating with me without me even trying. It was just like, they'd come forward and say, here, I want to talk to you. And it'd be like an animal, or it'd be a cryptid, or it'd be a tree. I mean, it'd be the land, it'd be a dolphin, it was amazing, the beings that started coming forward. It was almost as if they realized that I had this ability. And you guys, and thank you for bringing that up, David. It's beyond just this tool. I think the tools help me refine and hone some of my own abilities, but a lot of this stuff you can do without this tool. So when we talk about this during this episode, I want people to know this is not an episode to tell you, go use the Ouija board. If you want to, yeah, I'll help you deal with that and learn how to do that. But it's more like, let's learn to open ourselves up to other consciousness that are around us, whether we are able to see them with our physical apparatus or hear them or experience them. They're there and they're around, and we just need to learn how to open and tap that. And we can definitely have further discussions on how to do that.
I want to talk about critters, if we can go there for a bit now. As I recall, you have a critter that lives with you named Bear, right?
Oh, you remember Bear? Yes, Bear the white cat. Yes.
So now you communicate with Bear, but you probably don't necessarily use a Ouija board to do that, correct, or no?
No, I do both. So I'll back up here. So I know we didn't get into this too far. So this is like I was saying earlier, I didn't always understand that you could do so much more with the board until I'd already started meeting my angels and other people's angels. And it was like, come to Karen's house, you'll get to meet your angel kind of thing. And I was doing that for years. And then all of a sudden one day, this is how it started, talking to the animals. I was working the Ouija board with one of my board partners, and my angel comes through. Her name's Mary. And she said, hey, somebody wants to talk to you. And I'm thinking, well, that's cool, because I talk to a lot of different beings. Okay, bring them in. She goes, no, this is very different than what you've communicated with before. I said, okay, bring it in. And so the planchette kind of slows down and goes in another direction. And it just felt differently on my fingers on the planchette. And I know we talked about this last time. When you use this tool, you can start feeling what I like to call spirit signatures or energetic signatures, because every being that comes through has a different feeling. Almost like when you know you're with somebody, you get a feeling around that person might be different than your other friend or your parents. It's like you get a feeling, okay? So it changes. I go, somebody else is here. And then it slows down and it spells out, Hermes, cat, I love you. Now, I had a big fat pumpkin orange cat sitting there, very much alive, not transitioned, in a chair, sitting there, just kind of sitting there watching me on the board with my partner. And I said, what? She goes, yes, it's true. Your cat wanted to tell you that he loves you. And I said, well, come on, meow, meow. I mean, how do you do this? she said, well, kind of. She goes, the cat projects images or thoughts and feelings towards you, and knew this was its opportunity because you're always focused on this board, that it wanted to communicate that to you. So we took the liberty to translate those images, those thoughts, those feelings that your cat has about you, and put it into words and push it through the planchette with you. It's not your cat's doing it. It's their energies coming through and we're interpreting it. I said, oh, okay. So I did that for years. I still do it to this day. Bear first came to me on a board. And so he adopted me. So it was back when I was in Orange County, California. And he came to my back door and I was like, oh God, okay, little white cat, cute little collar. I'm like, not good, because we have coyotes and bobcats and all kinds of animals out here. And I'm thinking, not good. So I didn't let him in. He went off. And then about a month later, he came back. And now this time he came back with no collar, almost gray, wasn't white anymore. He just seemed like he needed food. So I brought him in and gave him a bath and put him in the garage overnight. And he just was really, really wanting to be part of my family. He already had 2 cats. I don't want to be the crazy cat lady, 3 cats, come on. Well, little did I know I was going to end up keeping him. So I did. I kept him. And I was about 2 weeks. And I was with one of my friends, one of my board partners, and we're sitting down and we're just using the board, talking to the guides and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, what the planchette spelled out, I like the name Bear. And my friend and I looked at each other like, we're looking at, and there's Bear on the floor, laying there, looking up at us. I'm like, this is so weird. And she goes, I think he just named himself. And I said, okay, Bear, what was your name before? And he said, George. I said, George. I said, okay, Bear. I said, we'll go with the name Bear, so that he named himself on the board.
Cool.
I think that's an upgrade for a cat, isn't it? From George to Bear.
I said,
Yeah, I
why
think it
did
is
you
too.
want to be named Bear? And it's so interesting because I'm thinking, how does he know this? He said, because Bear's like a strong animal. And by the way, the way he's very thick and the way he walks around, he kind of looks like a little white bear. I thought that's perfect name for him. So yeah, he actually named himself on the board. So that's what I do now. If I get a new pet, they get to name themselves.
So can you communicate telepathically with Bear without using the board?
I can, but it's a whole different thing now. So it asks me to have to switch to like feelings, as opposed to with the Ouija board. It's the feeling in the planchette. It's more mental. It is emotional too. But when I do the other kinds, like when I do readings, like what David was talking about earlier, when I do those readings, I have to switch totally into my heart and be centered in that space. So it's a whole different game. But yes, I can. And I find that I question myself more when I'm talking to the animals without the board than I do with the board. And that's just the only reason why is because I've been using the board for such a long time. But yeah, I've communicated with other animals before that way, just having a sensation in my own and other people's, and just by just tuning into their energy. Sometimes petting them helps. And so people ask me, well, how can I do this at home with, I want to know what my cat or my dog thinks. And I say, well, you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit, because you're going to think you're making this up. That's how it works. I said, but sit there with your animal and just be really quiet and just allow your animal to either lay by you or sit. You could pet your animal, but you want to just be like you're not really influencing it. Just allow it to relax, and then yourself to relax. And then the key here is you really got to be in tune with your feelings. Like, again, your heart space. You're going to get sensations. You might get images pop in, colors, words, sounds. It's all very inner. You got to like tune yourself. So it may not happen right away, but then you might just go, wow, I'm kind of getting the feeling that he's telling me this, or, and you got to just trust that and go with it. It gets easier over time, but you'll start getting that stuff and you'll say, that's not me. I feel this wonderful sense of like overexcitement. I go, that's not me, or even sadness. Sometimes you just got to feel that, or they have something they want to tell you. So it does take time, and it does take, as I said, to get yourself in that frame where you're not looking for like tangible stuff on the board with the planchette, but yet it's more of your inner senses. So yes, yes, I can do it. And actually everybody can do it. How you just know sometimes in your house, like you have a pet and you just go, oh, he wants to go for a walk. Oh, they're out of water. You just kind of get that. It just hits you. You don't think much of it other than, oh yeah, of course I would think that because I'm thinking about my animal. But it may hit you at a weird time when you're thinking about something else. Or plants work with people that way. Plants will go, I need water. You're watering me too much, or I need light. All of a sudden you go, gosh, move that plant into the windowsill. And you've got to think, well, where did that come from? So it comes so subtly like that. You're going to go, oh, that's just me. Well, no, this is how the universe talks to us. Why sometimes we do certain things we do or think certain things we do. It's because the energy, the information's always coming through us. It's just a matter of being able to discern it and to say, oh, that's outside of me. That's something else. It really takes a lot of time to fine tune this, but it's possible for everybody, Daniel, everybody.
So I guess based on what you just said, could we consider a plant a sentient being? Which probably a lot of people would say no.
Yes, it is a sentient being. It has an awareness. Now, is it a sentient being on the level of a human? Well, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but no, it doesn't think like we do. But do you know there's this book out there called The Secret Life of Plants? And I forget the gentleman's name, but I was doing a lot of communication with palm trees. I had a bunch of palm trees in my yard, and they're the ones that started talking to me first. It was really quite interesting, but I can get into that story in a moment. But this guy wrote this book, and his background is he's like a horticulturist, herbologist, or something. He has this like a PhD, something like that, advanced degrees in plants. And he says plants communicate to each other. They communicate to the plants that are encroaching upon them. They communicate to their saplings. They communicate to the animals. They may send out smells. They may drop certain leaves. They may not grow in a certain area. They may pull the roots back. They said how they communicate. And this was actually told to me before I read what this guy as a researcher says about plants communicating to each other and to other beings. I got from my palm trees that they have a worldwide net. And I said, what is that? And they said, well, it's our roots in the ground. We are record keepers of everything that's happened here on Earth because our roots go out. Our roots may end with the end of our tips of our roots, but it goes on because of our species. It goes on because of the other plants that we've touched. And it says we can communicate with other plants and vegetable life, anything with roots in the ground, around the world, because we're all in the ground. That's like our worldwide web or worldwide net. So I thought that was interesting. This guy said the same thing. He says they have all of their mitochondria. He was using, technical words in the ground, their roots, and that's how they communicate to each other. Is through the roots and the vibration and tapping into, he said, like moss or anything in the ground that sends out the signal. He says it's all there. I was like, that's bizarre. That is bizarre. That's exactly what my palm trees were telling me before I even read this book. So science is looking into some of these things. Now are they saying humans can talk to plants? Well, there's been a lot of experiments done with tomato plants. You guys might be familiar with this, but for your audience, they had some tomato plants in this greenhouse and they hooked it up to electrodes. And there was a guy that would come in and rip the leaves of the tomato. And every time he would rip the leaves of the tomato plant would respond and electrodes would go off, send off like a electrical pulse, and they could record it on these machines. And then, so what happened was the guy would just walk into the room before he even touched the leaves and the plants would shiver. And not only those plants would shudder and shiver and give out a signal like distress, other plants nearby would give out distress. So the plants were starting to pick up on vibrations. Now, does that mean they're communicating in their own way? So I don't want to tell you, plant goes, hi, Karen, how are you? But yet, let me tell you this, when they're being interpreted, just like that cat Hermes did, the other beings will help interpret it. So it could be an oversoul consciousness. It could be, I have a lot of helpers in the other dimensions, and they'll come through and say, this is what they're saying. And so it does come through like, hi, Karen, we are your out here at Soros. I talk to Soros too. We are your palm trees. You call us the sentinels. And I go, yeah, I do call you the sentinel trees. And they said, so, but are they saying that to me? No, again, somebody else, another being is transcribing it and translating it. And it comes through spelled out on the board. Now, people tell me, oh, I talk to trees all the time. I said, well, like what happens? They said, I'll be out walking in nature. And mind you, there's no Ouija board involved. Walking in nature, and I just get a sense of this tree just feels happy to me. And I just want to hug it. And it makes me feel better. And I go, well, that's a form of communication. Things don't have to be so blatant like it is with us humans. And like you just telepathically, a lot of these beings, every other being besides us, even your pets aren't that usually that vocal, maybe a little bit like dogs can be, but cats typically aren't. They only become vocal to help to because you're vocal with them and they want to communicate somewhat, but it's more on the telepathic feeling sensation. Again, that you're still communicating. I just found a way that I'm able to use it with the board, and it actually literally spells out. And I know, but I know there's a lot more help that goes into it. It's not like the trees, my spidey senses are going to move that planchette to talk to you. No, it has help. But yeah, there's communication going on all the time. The world is alive. The universe is alive. And we just have to be able to find a way to tap it. Now, I'm going to call it cracking the code of consciousness with the board, but also off the board, as David knows. When I do my readings, I'm not using the board at all. And it's just a matter of me getting into the space and really work with the guides. And they're the ones that are giving me information, and I'm reading it and feeling it and sensing it and giving it back. But that takes the time to develop that. But yeah, the world's alive, and everything, like I said, there's sentience on many levels. And I don't want to say one's better than the other, or they're different hierarchies. I guess we could say that, but I like to keep it like, not again pigeonhole it or give it just a parameter to it. As I'm exploring more and more things, I'm amazed at what you can have a level of communication with. So yeah, the world's alive.
Doesn't that let's see, am I unmute? Okay, good. I've got somebody here, speaking of air conditioning, I've got somebody here putting an air conditioner in here, and I don't want construction noises to intrude on our interview, so I've been muting myself. But anyway,
can't even hear it when you talk. We can't hear it. I can't hear it. Can you hear it, Daniel?
No, I can't.
Oh, that's good. I just they're not making that much noise. I just didn't want to have strange noises going off in the background. But anyway, I looked up that book that Karen mentioned. It's by Peter Tompkins, The Secret Life of Plants. It was a New York Times bestseller. He also did a lot of work on the pyramids in Egypt too. So
interesting. Okay.
He kind of covered I knew I was familiar with that name. It was probably from the pyramids though, not the plants specifically. But I don't want to get off on a tangent there too far, but the idea that you've just described, that plants have feelings, that plants can maybe even anticipate,
yes,
they can communicate with each other, doesn't that, I mean, it's fascinating on one level, and then it's also kind of terrifying, given how oblivious humans generally are to this, the idea that things can feel and sense and are aware and conscious of things. I mean, we just go across the planet waging war and clear cutting and whatever, and the extent to which we're just oblivious to what you're describing here, which I think we kind of know at a fundamental level is true. Things are alive. How do you deal with that when you're so sensitive to some of these things and you see humans just blowing through forests and whatever without any regard whatsoever for the potential even that these things are alive?
Well, it does sadden me, and I'll tell you, I get more sensitive to it as I get older, and as I work with these energies more and more. But I will say, you think of some of the native cultures and their reverence they had for the land, and it wasn't just the land. They're talking about everything that's living on the land. So they would, kill a buffalo. They would use every single aspect of the buffalo, the fat, the bones, the fur, everything about it, for celebrating that animal's life and using it in their own sustenance. And it's like having that kind of reverence. It's not just to kill or to have trophies. It was to kill for the necessity. And so there was always a prayer. It was always like before they went on a hunt, there was a prayer. There was they would talk about that animal. There was a story to be told. There was such respect. And it's like here's an example. So I love buffaloes, by the way. I just love buffaloes. And so I'm not surprised that one of the animals that came through and I spoke with, I actually I called dialing up the number. I dialed up the frequency of the buffalo and I said, I really want to talk to the buffalo, the Native American culture with the buffalo. So it's the American bison is what I wanted to talk to, not water buffalo, but the American bison. So we tapped into the energy, my partner and I, and got on the board, but the buffalo came through and said, I'm speaking for the consciousness of buffalo. Now, was it one individual buffalo I was speaking to? No, it was like the oversoul consciousness of the buffalo. And I have a whole system that I work with, different spirits, like I said, that helped me with this. And so the message was this, and it's the gist of it, but it will be written in one of my upcoming books where I have more of the details of the communication. But the buffalo said, we know of this type of communication where you can speak with us as you're doing now. They said your native, I think they call it the native tongue, or the native people on your land have done this with us for years. We appreciate their approach. They would honor us and use us and welcome us to share what we have to give them in their lives. So they're talking about being eaten by them and stuff like that. They said, interesting enough, they said, as we would greatly give ourselves to your native land, your native people, the grass will gladly lay itself down for us to give us sustenance. So they were trying to share how it was like the circle of life, and the grass, alive of consciousness, the vegetation would lay itself down, had no problem to be eaten by the buffalo. And the buffalo had no problem being stalked or killed and used by the native people, because there was such a reverence. So I'm not saying don't go eat meat, don't use leather. Although if you choose to, I welcome that. I come from a family of meat eaters. I haven't eaten meat myself since I was 21. I just never liked the taste of it. It's become a lot more than that for me now. I just like the lives of these animals, and they can talk to you, and it's just really, that makes it hard. But it's like honoring, like, I don't even like cutting down a tree. I don't even like moving a plant, but sometimes they're diseased and they have to. Here's an example. So in my house in Orange County, I had neighbors on both sides of me. And I had this huge, beautiful, it was actually two. I thought it was one tree split into two, but it turned out it was two. Turned out it was two trees, but they were growing together. They were the king palm, beautiful palm trees. They gotten so large. I was in the house for like 19 years, and these trees had just gotten huge. They started knocking down the fence next door, and it was encroaching upon my neighbor's property. So I was trying to, change the fence a little bit so it could like still accommodate the size of the tree. And then finally the neighbors came over and said, look, we can't have this anymore. You ruined our fence. I said, I get it. You're right. And they said, so this tree's going to have to go. I'm like, no, I was like so upset, but I knew it was on their property and they didn't want it there. And so I really tried to stall. I said, well, let me call an arborist and all I'll get the right person there to not kill both. Maybe you have to kill one of them. And then, so it's the funniest thing that happened. Now talk about synchronicity. By the way, we haven't gotten into it so much, but a lot of this work you do becomes very synchronistic in your life. And here's an example. So I'm feeling such remorse. I'm feeling horrified that I have to kill one of these trees. And they're huge and they're beautiful, taller than my house. I have a double-story house. They're beautiful. Okay. And I have a relationship with all my plants. I really do. I love them. I take care of them. So I call an arborist. Somebody answers the phone and goes, it was some hospital. It was the ER. I got the ER room. And I thought, what? She's like, yeah, I'm on call for the ER room. She goes, what's your emergency? And I said, well, I have to cut down a tree. I have to cut down my tree. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm trying to call an arborist. She goes, no, it was a hospital. I was like, and she's like, you have to cut your tree down? And we had this whole conversation. I said, yes. And she said, oh my God, I had to cut a tree down. It was my grandfather's favorite. And it got old, it was dying, and we had to cut it down because it was horrible. And I go, it's horrible for me. And then we had this whole conversation. And by the end of the conversation, it lasted just a few minutes, but by the end of it, I was like, you know what? Thank you. I guess I meant to call you today. And it was like an emergency, and I was feeling horrible, and it was like self-help therapy or something. So then I finally got the real number to the arborist. I was off by like one digit or something. And so I called the guy, and he's like, comes over and he goes, yeah, you know what, Karen, this will be fine. We take this side out. This one's going to be totally fine. And then, I talked to the trees on the board, and then they said, look, it happens. Sometimes we have to gladly lay ourselves down to, it's time to go. It's all right. This part will survive and it will be fine. That was their whole thing. It was like, just honor us before you do this. That was it.
That's the key, right? Is the honoring and the feeling like part of the chain, the circle of life, as you said. And humans, unfortunately, not all of us, of course, but we still believe we're at the very top of the chain, right? I mean, Dan and I talk about, Dan's disagreeing, we're not. And I
I
agree
think we're
with you,
at the
Dan.
bottom of the chain.
We don't
actually.
behave the way we should if we're at the top of the cosmic, food chain. But Dan and I talk about the Brookings Report Institution. That's one of the things we like to chat about. And that was a big study done, decades ago. But scientists were trying to figure out what would happen if humans encountered evidence of indisputable evidence of ET intelligence. And they concluded some pretty harsh things about humanity, and that's that we wouldn't deal with it very well, and it would have the effect of knocking us down a couple the rungs on the cosmic ladder. And so what do you think, Karen, about the idea of introducing higher intelligence, higher beings? What does that do to humans, when we do finally make that realization that no, we can't assume that everything is there to serve us, right? I mean, we're here to serve others ourselves too. What do you think it'll take to make that transition for us?
Well, we're not doing too good at it, are we, right now? Look what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Look at what we do, what's happened in the world recently. So things are coming to a head. And I see that as positive when things are coming to the head, but it's horrible. I mean, look at all the deaths, look at all the just discourse in the world right now. So, okay, so I have some experience with that. So I do speak to off-worldly beings. The guides are actually beings that have never been born in a physical body. They're an extension of source energy. The difference between ourselves and them is that they're just pure light, and they don't need to be in a body. They don't need the human experience, and they know they're God. They know that they are the great matrix of all. They're an aspect of it. They said, you guys forgot that. So it's like us here to really be here in the dirt. We are here to, be maybe the low food chain at times, to learn, to grow. It's like this aspect, we'll call ourselves an aspect. Humanity is an aspect of this greater matrix of consciousness. We can call it God, we can call it source, we can call it all that is. And that's a living, breathing makes it sound like a human. It's living, existing, conscious, aware source energy that wants to experience itself in all expressions, including the grass, including the buffalo, including the fish, including the dolphin, including the snake, including the humans. So, and it knows it's going to have limited types of awareness and limited types of being when it's in those bodily forms in third dimension. Therefore, it knows it's going to have its own issues and its own problems it's got to learn to deal with. So part of it is when we come here and experience being human, we know human has its foibles and has its limitations. Also, yet humans can be really beautiful and loving towards each other. So it has like a whole range of experiences to have. And so source goes, I want to go forth and have all these different experiences. So maybe this type of being will be the best to have that in terms of what that feels like, what that experience is about. So even though when we're in it, looking at ourselves going, God, we could do better. The thing is we are source. We're an aspect of source, just like the guides are, but yet we chose to come and be limited in this form and to deal with those limitations and to see what we experience, to see how we grow and evolve and help ourselves to remember, put the pieces together, but also to remember, recall who we really are. And so we have to have all these experiences. So I hate to judge it and say humanity is just bad, but there's another story I want to tell you when I finish this thought. It's like we're here to have an experience to start putting the pieces back together and remembering who we are, but it's harder to know who we are when we're here with everything that's coming at us and all the foibles and the problems we have. So that's part of the experience, good and bad and in between, and even the ugly parts. And so the guides would say, you're not here to judge yourself that you make mistakes, but you are here to pick yourself up and see how you can do it differently. And they say, so you're here to evolve on that level and you can call in help. And so part of it is part of us remembering, recalling that we are God, we are source, we are all that is, and to call upon that and awaken that within ourselves. So instead of having somebody come rescue us, like a extraterrestrial race or somebody out there, or even the guides to come rescue us, or even God, or everybody says somebody's going to come rescue us. No, it's us awakening with the Christ within us, the divinity within us, the God within us, the Godhead within us, to rescue ourselves, to begin to see what we can shift and change. So we kind of need contrast, not kind of, we really do need contrast in our lives, in our experiences, and to say, look where we're going, look how sick we can be, but also look how great we can be. And we see that within ourselves too. Now, I had this experience. This was about, oh gosh, 5 or 6 years ago. So Rosemary Ellen Guiley and myself, we would get together often. And one of the things we like to do was to go on explorations and to do the Ouija board, of course, but also to do like haunting things and just to go explore. And she'd bring her husband and I bring my board partner, and we would go to these different places. And one time we were going up to Joshua Tree, and we wanted to go to the Joshua Tree Inn specifically to go to the room where Graham Parsons, that famous musician, last spent his night before he ended up killing himself. He died, right? He overdosed. So she went to the room that Graham Parsons was staying in. I got the one right next to it. And we got together that evening after we all drove up there. We got together that evening and we got the Ouija board out. She got a Frank's box out. We're going to talk to Graham. We can't wait. It's going to be great. Because usually when I go somewhere, I could pull up some kind of energy. It's not hard to dial it up. But Graham wasn't coming through. Instead, what happened was another being came through and said, hi, I was watching you earlier today. I was like, watching who? And it turned out I was watching Rosemary and Joe, her husband, earlier that day, and said, yeah, I saw you. And then, and she goes, Karen, weird thing. On the way up here, there was this light in the sky. It was like following us. I kept saying, Joe, there's something that's trying to talk to me. There's something up there, this consciousness. And it was like, they saw a UFO basically. And it was following them up there. And I didn't know about this, but then she started telling me, and I was like, okay, let's see what this being has to say. And the guy says, I say guy, I don't know if it's a guy or not. I'll just call it a he for purposes of communication right now. He said, hi, I've heard about this type of communication where, humans can talk. It's always through consciousness. They don't even realize we're using a board. They just know we're doing some way of tapping their energy. He said, so I want to come and try this level of conversation. I said, where are you? He says, well, I'm in the ship above you guys. We're like, well, let's go look. We see nothing. It's like, you won't, it's cloaked. He said, but we're here just to talk to you about where humanity is. And they said, this is the same story that many of your kind have received over the years. We can't come. We're not going to do any kind of full disclosure until we can see that you're kinder to each other first, because if you're willing to fight each other like you do, they said, there's no way we're going to show ourselves. That you just want to attack us, or you want to either herald us as gods. That's not what we're here to do. But they went on and said a little bit more than that. We're like, okay, I guess that was our communication the night. So much for Graham. But yeah, so we had this conversation with this being. And we said, what do we call you? He says, just call me M, like the letter M. We said, does that stand for something? He says, well, it's not important, but just call me the letter M. So that's what he wanted to be called. And there was a little bit more that he said than that, but it was very fascinating that we thought, here we were, got to sit down and have this, ghostly encounter. But no, this what came through instead was this extraterrestrial.
Well, that really makes sense what the ET said, because I'm thinking back to, I'm kind of an old sci-fi movie guy, The Day the Earth Stood Still with Michael Rennie. I mean, that's essentially the message that the ETs are giving the people of Earth, that you got to get your act together, or because we're not gonna, if we intervene, we'll have to intervene out of some kind of safety perspective so that you don't bring your violence to us.
Exactly. And they don't want to be attacked either, or in the past be seen as gods, which is what they said has happened before. In the past, they've seen us as gods. And now we're hearing all of this all over the place. You see it on Ancient Aliens. You see it on all these shows. Everybody's talking about it. I was getting this stuff even before that, back in the 80s, about this stuff. Meldeck and Mars and planetary wars and ETs coming down. And I was like, what? I'm like, well, this is too much. And then here I fast forward 30 years. Oh my God, they're talking about all this stuff, regular conversations now with people. So I'm like, yeah, so they're there. They've been around. They've been with us. They've been watching us. And when I say ETs, it could be all different types. This guy didn't explain what he looked like, but he said, for the most part, we're very similar to humans. We didn't get much more than that from him. But there are other beings out there who don't look like us. And I've had conversations with them too. Again, through my universal communicator, I call it my great cosmic phone, the board. It's amazing. But you guys, I got to say, again, just using this tool, I'm glad I used it as like a training tool, or like you call it training wheels, for me to do my own abilities, because it allowed me to believe in the possibilities and allowed me to believe in myself as the channeler of this tool, but then to step off the board and do a lot of this work. And so I got to say, I feel very blessed for the work I've been able to do. And when I'm talking about Ouija work, and then how it's taken me to a level to be able to see different types of beings as well. So now I have more of a physical experience with different types of beings, seeing them, touching them, hearing them, whether it's telepathically, but still it's very, very physical. And also even deceased people. It's like, it just enriches and it gets even greater and greater, it seems, as I age.
Very interesting stuff. So I'm being cognizant of our time here. We've had Karen captivated on our podcast for about an hour or so. I have one more line of inquiry, and then Dave, maybe you can finish up with any thoughts that you have. So Karen doesn't feel like she's part of an alien abduction experience.
Rapid fire.
We're kind of aliens, I guess. So I'm going to go back to the cryptids, because I'm totally fascinated by cryptids. We've got a couple shows coming up. You probably know who Ron Moorhead is.
I do.
Yeah, Sarah Sounds. And then there's another guy that we heard from, Michael Peterson, that is part of something called Ontario Sasquatch. So we have a lot of Sasquatch shows. So the big question about Sasquatch is, what is it? Is it a flesh and blood creature? Is it an interdimensional creature? Give us Karen's spin on that.
Okay.
Or maybe it's both.
Yeah, well, I love Sasquatch. It's it's probably my most favorite cryptid. And we talked about earlier, I do enjoy Mothman, and I like Dogman too, but I haven't experienced those. And I'll give you my closest to experience of Sasquatch. All right. So imagine this. We spoke to Sasquatch on the board again. And so let me explain this a little better. So when we start talking to the different animals and beings that don't seem human, there's a level of conscious. I communicate with the oversoul of that species. So you can call it that way. Like we have oversouls of like, if you think about even your soul family, we all soul tribes with people that you really resonate with. You tend to be like family in other lives. And so you kind of call it your soul family. And there may be an oversoul energy that you all relate to. It's that kind of thing. So species have an oversoul. And there's a being that I communicate with, and simply just call him Papa. I don't know why. He said, just call us Papa. He said, we are like the guides are to you, but we're like that to other beings you want to communicate with, specifically, and especially beings that aren't considered humans. So it could be a wide variety. And I'm not saying Sasquatch isn't like a human. They're just a different species. Okay. I'm not saying they're human either, but not to put it on a lower level or anything like that. So Papa will speak for like the bison. It'll speak for the rattlesnake. It'll speak for Sasquatch. It'll speak for mermaids and dragons and all these interesting beings. So Rosemary's at my house again, and we love to do a lot of exploration. So she always likes to, when she was writing, she liked to get some other opinions from like spirit. And so we would talk to the guides, and then this other being would come through named Papa. We'd say, okay, you want to talk about Sasquatch? Let me get that information for you. So what would happen is we would start communicating with the oversoul of Sasquatch through this Papa being, kind of like I spoke to the cat through Mary Angels, that kind of whole dynamic. And Sasquatch said, number one, they did not like to be called Bigfoot. They felt it was very derogatory. They said, instead, we really like the native names that people of your land have given us. Sasquatch is only one of them, but there's many, many names that you guys know. And I know Moorhead would know those names that different indigenous cultures have given them. And they said, we've been on the land with these indigenous cultures. They know of us, and we call them brothers, and we enjoy their names. Now, they don't communicate like we do, but they use telepathy. They told me that, I know what Rosemary asked. This is the funniest thing. So Rosemary said, we had a lot of, this is going to be in the upcoming book too, a lot of different conversations and different times of communication with this species of Sasquatch. And she wanted to know about the connection between Sasquatch and extraterrestrials, spaceships, aliens, right? Everybody says, oh, they come together. Well, she said, she just was talking, when we work with the spirits or the energies with the board, we just talk as if the being's there. That's part of the process of really directing your or dialing up the frequency. So she was saying just out loud, hey, you guys, I want to know a little bit more about your species. We've been told, or often we see, there seems to be, lights in the sky, crafts, and then you might see Bigfoot at that time, or Sasquatch. He goes, up, we call it Sasquatch, or Sasquatch at that time. What's the connection there? And they said, this is what the being said back. He said, well, we'd like to ask you that question too. Often we see you, and then we see the lights in the sky and the crafts, and we're thinking those are your beings. And they're saying, so it was kind of like a joke way, funny way of saying, well, they come with you, not with us. And then we asked them, we said, well, so are you connected? I said, no, but we understand often you will get lost in when they come and get you and take you on this craft or take you away from your planet, you might get lost in another dimension where we go into other dimensions. We like shapeshifters. We are interdimensional. We do both. We're physical and we can shift into other dimensions. We help you sometimes and bring you back. So we do know about your, what you call your alien friends. They don't come with us, but yet we tend to be around because we thought that's a way to access you. Like you have like magical things happen when you have them around as well. So they acknowledge not their relationship, but our relationship and fascination with the extraterrestrials. They did talk about how they're physical, but they choose to go in and out of dimensions, in and out of phasing, you can call it that, in and out of timelines. So they can phase from this into like a parallel life or into just a whole nother world that's like parallel is not the right word. It's almost like saying just dimensions that are crossing each other, that exist, that coexist together. We can't see them because our abilities only focus on this third dimension. We're losing so much in the color spectrum and the light spectrum of things that like even animals can see, we can't see. So they said we can go into other dimensions and you guys can. We don't like to be around your kind. Your kind is very nosy and questionable of us, and we're also quite frankly afraid. We're afraid that. Yeah, we're afraid, and we'd rather just be by ourselves. There was a time we were more close to your type, but we'd rather be alone by ourselves. So it'll be very hard to ever catch up with us, kind of thing. So, I mean, they understand us, they recognize us for, like we were saying earlier, for who we are, our foibles, our limitations, and how atrocious we can be to each other and also to the other beings. They recognize that. So they're not just killing mercilessly, like when they're killing a deer to eat or whatever they're eating. They're doing it because like the native cultures did, out of reverence and respect, and the animals are like that. They're okay with that. The animals know this from talking to so many different animals, like animals that are sick and ready to die, and then animals that have transitioned, animals that come back and have a new life, remembering their past lives. There's all kinds of really cool stuff here, you guys. Animals are like, they understand that they're not always going to be in this dimension, and they're okay making that change. And they just easily make that change, regardless if they were in a terrible death, like they were sick or were hit by a car or something, or shot or something. They just make that transition quickly. They understand that they will continue on. There's not this sense of, oh my God, I'm gone. They're not worried about it. They live in the moment. And a lot of these beings do. Sasquatch understands the difference of time and has an understanding that we have a relationship with time, and they can have a relationship with time, but instead they prefer to see themselves as in the moment, but yet they understand that they're also able to go in and out of dimensions. They totally get that. I mean, you want to talk about an aware species, they are very much aware, like dolphins and whales. And not to say they're less than, and people go, oh, dolphins and whales and horses are the next most intelligent animal. No, they're intelligent in their own way, the way they need to be. Doesn't mean they don't have, because they don't have technology like we have. They have different technology in terms of using their telepathy and switching into different timelines and going in and out of dimensions. That's like crazy technology, just that they live differently than us, and it doesn't mean they're less than. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, very amazing. Okay, one last scripted question, and then we'll let Dave finish up here. So the picture behind me, Mothman, that we did a show. Who was that with, Dave? Bill Grabowski. We had him on. He was talking. He's really researched Point Pleasant and what happened there.
Nice.
He was not sure, as I recall. I'd almost have to go back and listen to that. I don't think he was sure that Mothman was a flesh and blood creature. He might have, if I'm recalling this correctly, he might have even thought that it was some kind of a government psyop kind of thing, which I don't know. I can't say that he's wrong about that. So, what is, and I'm saying is because I think there's still reports of Mothman out there. What is Mothman from your understanding?
Yeah, great question. Now, I have not explored or communicated with the species or the oversoul of Mothman through the board, but there's just so many beings you can talk to. But I will say I spoke to, like, again, I mentioned dragons earlier and mermaids and these beings that we think are mythological, or maybe they don't really exist kind of thing, or that we made them up in our mind, or maybe the government made them. My feeling is this, just from the communications I've had with these other beings, is that they exist, they're real, they exist in another timeline, another dimension, and they slip through. Same with Dogman. That's been the only information I've received so far on Dogman and Mothman, because I love them. But it's that they come from another dimension and they slip through. Now, I do know about what you're talking about, these psyop things that the government's doing, and the Montauk experience, and they go on and that stuff. I believe there's also an element of that going on, not so much with the Mothman, but with other kinds of beings that are out there, that they're creating them, or that they're making them into super soldiers or whatever. There's you guys, as weird as this sounds, and not to your audience, not to you guys, but there is so much beneath the surface that we won't ever fully even understand or comprehend. And some of it is just so gruesome and disgusting that I think it would just, I don't think a human brain could even take it. But some of it is just so amazing too, that would be so fantastical that I don't think we would even want to believe it. And we can talk about whether it's extraterrestrials and the work they're doing with our government, or we can talk about these PSYOP programs, or we can talk about how far advanced we really are, the military underground stuff. There's so much. And even with all the different races that have been visiting us from other solar systems, it's out of control. I mean, it's all there. But I think what happens is, I think a lot of us go, oh no, we need it neat, we need it tidy, we need to say this is what this has to be, or you know what I mean, to make it safe for our mind, or to even think about it, where I think sometimes the possibilities are endless. Like if you think about the mantis being as a species, there are several different kinds of mantis being species. So it's not just one, you know, it's like us human, we have different races of the human species. So they have a lot of different races too. And so you start getting into that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's why you might see Sasquatches that look a little different. There's maybe a little shorter, maybe different colored fur, hair. Same with Dogman, why you might see just different sizes, same thing. It's like different species. But my feeling is a lot of this comes from the other dimensions. And it's just like there's a tear, or they know how to jump the dimensions, which is what Sasquatch says they know how to do.
Interesting. Dave, go ahead.
Oh, so much stuff to ponder here. I think going back to a few minutes ago when Karen talked about the need for us as a species to advance and evolve to the point where we're not shooting at each other anymore. And it seems like, this has been the story or the justification for decades, almost a century by this point, for why ET doesn't, make that official contact with the rest of us, or doesn't show him or her or itself. And I'm wondering, what are the criteria that we need to meet in order to be able to join this cosmic community, or at least have them acknowledge that we are worthy of even being in the discussion, and the fact that they don't, I guess you could argue that we've been getting little dribs and drabs, we got this little trickle of information coming in with the Pentagon saying, hey, look at this UFO, it's unexplained and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, the news media jumps all over and goes, this is the first evidence ever of the possibility. Of course, anyone who's been following this knows that we've had evidence for 50 years, maybe 80 years, that is compelling. So we've hit these tiny little milestones along the way that for somebody like me or Dan or Karen here, I mean, it's just painfully slow, this process. And I'm just wondering, what point do we have to hit where it becomes acceptable to include us in this cosmic community? Or Now, if you think that there could be another possibility, and that's that there is not an intention to let us in fact, that we're a scourge on the earth, that we're not ever going to make the club, so to speak. And that could be a possibility too, is that we are in a prison on this planet instead of tending to its gardens and evolving along with it. So where do you think we fall in that spectrum, Karen, in terms of what the future holds for us? Or is it entirely up to us whether we get there or not?
Well, when you bring up the point about what do we need to do, it feels like there's like a law of critical mass that has to happen here, where enough people are open and willing. And what is that number? We don't know. It's just that tipping point. And so that's like the $1 million question, is like, what is that tipping point? What's it going to require? But I will say this: contact is happening. Disclosure is happening. It's happening all over the place. It's been happening for a lot of people. A lot of people have been having experiences. And I gotta tell you guys, many of us have had abductions, especially back in the 60s, 70s, 50s. We'll just go back. I'm going to stick with our lifetimes. Okay. Because you got to understand, they've been visiting these other cultures, as you probably seen on shows too. And the ones I talked to, they're like, we've been around forever. They've been visiting us for eons. They've been visiting us from the beginning of time. And yet here we are now. We've become so technologically advanced. In terms of our technology, our electronics and stuff like that, computers, our planes, everything we use, or even our communication devices, even now being on Zoom and our phones and all this, it's so technologically advanced that we kind of left that part of the humanity, the element of humanity I was talking about earlier, how you do this work to be in reverence with the animals and get their communication from them. It's like learning, giving that respect to get it. So we've become so far removed from how the indigenous cultures were. I'm not saying we should go back to live in, huts and, no concrete and no cell phones. There's got to be a part of us going back to our humanity roots, like the guides talk to me about all the time. And they're always teaching people when they come to me for readings is how to strengthen yourself back up to that level, which means breaking yourself back down to heart. And until we can get back in that heart space, and that's where the critical mass has to happen with enough of humanity. So we can't be having these world wars. We can't be having these world excursions, quote unquote. We can't be doing any of this stuff we're doing to each other. On some level, yes, there's always going to be uprising and always kind of be some problems, because again, we talked about earlier, that's part of the human nature of coming here and having the contrast to learn from. But when's the time going to come? I feel like we're on the cusp of that. I feel like it's coming again. Our cultures have had it in the past. I mean, you go back and look at some of the Navajo traditions. And again, I spent a lot of time in New Mexico, and I worked on a reservation before, and I've been on that sacred land, and you can see some of the petroglyphs and hieroglyphs. They're drawing these beings. They're showing you these beings that there are star people that visited them. And recently, I got to tell you, I was out hiking. This was just not even a year ago. So maybe about 8 or 9 months ago, I was out hiking. And all of a sudden this flash, this is how it comes, you guys. I want people, they're listening to pay attention. I get this flash in my mind. I get this image. I get this picture, and boom, I went, whoa, what's that? And it was a picture of this man. And I heard, I am from the stars. I know you. And I went, what? So anyway, I ended up drawing him. He showed me himself, and I was just pushed to draw a picture of him. And I drew that. I've shared it before on my shows, a few shows. And then I had a friend that's a psychic. She said, what happened to you today? I can tell you something. And she was going on and telling me this whole story. I went, that's exactly what happened to me today. She's like, no way. And I go, yep. So the story starts falling in place for ourselves personally, but we're getting contact. That was a contact from a being who was from the stars, who was part of a Native American tribe in this area that I was resonating with. And it's because we shared a life together before here. But now he's went back, and he's a star being still. And so that's right there is contact. Now, is that like a plane or like a plane? Is that like a ship landing on, like everybody says, oh, it's got to land on the White House front lawn or something? No, it's not, because if it did, they'd be surrounded and shot. They come to people, they come to you in dreams. Many people, again, back to that I was saying earlier, of our age and the era we grew up, they were abducting us. They were coming to visit us for whatever reason. And that's changed a lot more recently. They're saying they're coming to people now telepathically. I get information all the time. They come to me and I hear them. I've seen them literally with my eyes. So it's like, they are here. And I know other people like myself, they're showing up and talking to them and giving them messages. And people sometimes see them, sometimes they just feel them. They get them in dreams. Dreams is the best way for them to come, because we're not going to fight them. We're not so scared, and we can be a little more open in the dream state. So they'll come there, but contact is happening now. Worldwide contact, where we're like, oh, our space brothers, let's hang out together. That's going to take a little bit of time, but I think we're on the cusp. And like I said, they were here, work with people on the pyramids. They were talking about the pyramid on the moon. They were there building those space commands on the moon. They were there on the other planets. They were here working with some of the greatest cultures that we have, that we don't even understand how they built these pyramids. They were here. But what happened was we saw them as gods and worshiped them. Some wanted that, but most of them did not. Until we can find our own internal divinity, like I was talking about earlier, and that's what we're here to do. Find that, recognize that we don't need to follow anybody, any guru or somebody else, then that's when they can also come. It's not just us being more peaceful. It's us not wanting to save us. Oh, please save us. And to us give our power over to them. The ones that are kind, and there's more of the benevolent ones than malevolent, as there is really more benevolent humans than there are malevolent, although malevolent ones we always hear about. When you hear that about the species to other species, it's the fact is we've got to be able to not give our power over to them, and we got to be open to realizing that we aren't necessarily the apex of all of existence. There's many other beings that are a lot more powerful than us. And yet they most of them, I find, really love us, and they were waiting for us to just, enter back into this galactic federation, you want to call it, or this connection, because we are like all from star particles. We're all, of this, created from the same types of atoms and molecular structure. We all share that somehow. And also we're all imbued with the universal energy of source, matrix, all that is the one, however you want to call it. That they want us to recognize that first within ourselves, and then to find a more peaceful space to be. We don't have to be perfect. We're not perfect. They're not perfect either. But then we can start sharing more into like a communal aspect. But that's going to take a little bit of time. But I think we're closer to it than we've been. And what I mean by that is closer we've been in this last cycle of the recession of the ages, the cycles that we've been going through. We're like at that golden moment again, where we get it like every 26,000 years, we get that opportunity. We're here. We're right there on that edge again. It's coming, but we got to prepare for it. And I think you having these kind of conversations, your kind of shows, you're seeing more and more being able to talk about the stuff on TV, and talk about in social groups, whether it's on social media or on the internet, or talk about it at conferences. It's like, that's right there is saying we're awakening. And it's this little bit more of awakening. That's the tipping point. Enough of that awakening on these different dimensions and levels I just mentioned. It's like, that's when I feel, at least that's what some of the guides have told me about this information, when we can expect to be open to these other beings communicating with us and contacting us. And just look around you. All these different life beings, these energies, these different creatures on our planet are what I like to call the calling card of these beings from other dimensions and from other off-planetary galactic places, galaxies. They leave their calling card here. So the diversity of our species here on this planet alone is almost like showing you, it's like a signpost to say, I exist elsewhere. You're seeing an aspect of me. I left a calling card here. So that will give us an idea of just how diverse the universe is with different beings. And they're very similar to the ones we have here.
Wow.
Yep, that's a lot to think about. And one last point. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Richard Dolan. Have you
Oh,
talked
yes.
to Richard? I really like his approach to a lot of the stuff. It's very no nonsense, but he tackles some pretty bizarre subjects with such skill that you read about them and you think, well, it doesn't really sound that bizarre, the way he puts it. And one of the things he discusses, one of his more recent books is, I can't remember exactly what it's called. I have it on my shelf here, but After Disclosure, I think, or The Day After Disclosure. And so he goes into the very practical things that might happen, that likely would happen, and the things that we'd have to deal with, the day after it became widely known, as you said, Karen, the critical mass had been achieved. And he said, let's look at the practical aspects of what this would change in our world. He goes into the legal system. It's like, now we got to talk about lawsuits involving ET or influence on corporate profits, or, just silly human things that probably would happen. I mean, I guarantee you somebody would sue the ETs, and would that clog up the courts? I mean,
You're right.
comical,
There's
but
it opens up a whole new
happen.
can of worms, or
I know.
several cans of worms, right? Think about this too. It will change our institutions, our different structures, such as religion,
Mhm.
technology, healthcare. There's so many other advancements and things they're using that we would blow our minds. So
Well,
we're just really not ready for that yet, because we're
Yeah.
still focused on, gas and oil and greed and money and all that stuff. It's like we have to change some of our structures too. That's why it was really important when I was saying earlier, we really need to find that our guru is really within ourselves. And once we can do that, we realize it's not all the outer trappings, it's not all the outer stuff, really, that I don't need to look towards somebody else to save me. Oh, then now I can appreciate that, yeah, we got some technology, we got these structures over here that can help me, maybe some institutions, but I'm beyond that. I'm so much more than just that. And that's where we aren't there. That's the part that really has, it's what's the word I want to use? It's almost like kindergartenish. We're like in kindergarten when it comes to that.
Mhm.
And we really need to wake that up to more of a graduate level. We're going beyond even college level, like graduate PhD level. So we can go, oh, okay. I am God. I am a divine being. And that's who I am truly within. And I could also maybe heal myself. And I'm not saying everybody can heal everything. I'm just saying you have a lot more empowerment within yourself, within your grasp, to start not relying on all these outside sources. Because he's right. Things are going to be drastically changed. We got to think about what's going to happen afterwards. And then people just being so scared because they were always told, this is it. We are it. We're made in the likeness of God or the divine. And the reality is there's so many beings that are very different than us, that look very different than us. And even the species here, we don't even recognize as divine beings. I mean, that's where it's got to start too. Start recognizing these species around us, that they also have, they have the presence of this, all that is within them, just a different way of showing it. So it's like not being so judgmental and not being so close-minded that humanity is the upper apex at the top, at the level, it's not. And so that's where we need to get to, and understand that our institutions are not the end all. Some of them have to be broken down and reestablished, and some of them need to go away completely. And that's what I think people aren't ready to do, because it's going to require a lot of change, mentally, emotionally, psychically, spiritually, physically, when this happens.
Well, that was what the Brookings report was about. And it's unfortunate they didn't do further follow-ups. I think it was funded for a follow-up, to kind of explore some of the practicalities of what you're saying, which is, yes, scientists are going to be freaked. And that was the interesting thing, is that they went in saying that religions would be the most freaked out. And of course, they concluded that, yes, people would need to reassess their concept of God. They would have to reassess spirituality in general. But they really concluded, more interestingly, that the scientists would be the most shaken by such a discovery, because they would realize that they were not at the very top of the inquiry. They would realize that they were the ones under the microscope in certain cases. So that was fascinating. But you're right, everything will change, which kind of explains the approach. Think of the logistics problems that these ETs must have when they're trying to figure out, how do we do this? And then you have the idea that maybe they're ETs with different motivations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some are more or less interested in keeping us prominent on this planet, but in general, I think that they want us to thrive and continue and evolve. But how do you make that happen, given all the things that all the problems that we currently have? So I hope you're right that we're on the cusp of something. I have days where I think we're never going to make it.
Oh, I know. I just looked at what's going on right now, and I think that too, and I want to backpedal. But no, I keep being reminded that we're in a great awakening, and I know we all know that, we can feel it. And before the great awakening happens, you have to look at the underbelly of what's not working, and that's what we're seeing in the world right now. We have to see the ugly underbelly of a lot of things, people, institutions, events, places, governments, ruling factions. We have to see the things that weren't working in order to change them. And so we're seeing this huge movement of change. And most importantly, you're seeing people start taking back the power into their own hands. And that's part of you relying on yourself. And I'm saying you're alone in the world. I'm saying we can rely, other people can help us, but it's going back to, you know what, I am a divine being and I want to understand more about that. I want to start using my abilities more. I want that. This is my favorite thing. It's helping people really begin to access and hone these psychic and clairsenses and all these abilities I'm talking about to be able to experience, see. It's not like it happens every day, but when it does happen, you're like, whoa, I really am awake and I really am part of this greater picture. And you start to realize that, and then you start treating life more sacredly, and you start treating others, not just people, but the environment. We're talking about the plants and animals earlier. That's what really changes. That really changes. And that is the small change that we each need to be doing. And we're doing on some level. We're not the same way I described it, but we need to be doing these small changes. Like they always say, learn to tend to your own front porch, sweep that first before you go out and sweep the world. There's a lot to be said about that. It's important for us to take care of ourselves. And if we can learn to not be so afraid and about the world and even things that are going badly and not get so caught up in it, but yeah, pay attention, help where you can, but learn to fine tune yourself. As the walking Ouija board, that's my joke. I'm always the walking Ouija board. Fine tune yourself and abilities, because you'll start having your own contacts. And enough people start having these contacts, whether it's with spirit guides or deceased animals, transition people, animals, or it's like an angel, or just all of a sudden you get premonitions or prophetic visions or telepathic downloads, or you might even witness a mothership in the sky. It's Sasquatch or Sasquatch foot. It's like a footprint. It's like that's awakening you. You are going, wait, there's so much more than just me. And that's where things get special. You start realizing everything around us is relevant. Everything around us is sacred. And if we can just see that beauty out there because we have it within ourselves first, that's where the change really starts. And that's what allows these incredible beings that want to come through and work with us, because then they can see our true intentions and feel our true intentions within our heart and not just in our minds.
I feel like when I listen to Karen, I'm participating in a graduate course in spirituality. And that's why you're so important as a guest for us. If you ever find your way out of the desert and come up to Washington State, whether you want to hang out with Sasquatch or Dave and I, we take you out and wine and dine you, and we do show you what the Northwest is all about. So I just really appreciate you coming on. I enjoy hearing what you have to say, and you're always a welcome guest on our show. I think Dave probably
And
feels.
the enthusiasm is infectious too, Karen.
Yes.
I don't know where you get all that energy from, but it's probably just because you are passionate about all these subjects.
I am passionate about it. And what happens is when I'm talking about this stuff, because it's been such a huge part of my life, as you know, it's like I tap into that reservoir of source. I tap into that matrix of energy and I can feel it. And typically when I'm doing like the Ouija board work or channeling, my cat wants to be right there, right next to me, or right. And I'm surprised, where are you? He's not in here right now. He might be sleeping, but he's usually right with me because he feels the energy. So it's an energetic vibration. When I'm speaking and talking on any of these shows, especially with you guys, you're very open to this. I can tap that reservoir and bring up as much as I can. And sometimes it's not me going, oh, what am I going to say? It's just like I told you, it'll just start coming out. So it's like a channeling of information I feel like it needs to be shared now. And I want to say to you guys, I lived in Portland for 4 years. You probably didn't know that. Back, it was 95 through 99 before I came to California, but I have friends in Washington and I probably will be going up there soon. So, to go visit one of my dear friends up there. So I would love to see you guys. And I gotta say, I would love to see you guys and hang out a little bit and chat some more, and wine and dine and all that fun stuff, and go look for Bigfoot, Sasquatch. I get corrected in my mind. I was the one corrected in the beginning, like, don't call me Bigfoot, call me Sasquatch. And then, we can maybe do a live show or so. That'd be fun. But you guys, it's a joy coming on. It's a joy coming on your show and being a guest. So I want to say I really appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you again so much for having me.
And I'm sure that you're going to get some marriage proposals that follow this particular appearance on our show, because you're just really
It'll
magnetic.
be from people in Mongolia, though. We have to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
they
seems,
gotta be a little closer for me, okay?
yeah.
That's our main audience. Dan always joke. We got the yak herders in outer Mongolia as our primary demographic, because they just like to listen to us drone on. They don't understand the language or anything. That's our inside joke, because it's like, I don't know who listens to us, but we're getting bigger. We have an audience, and I'm sure they will appreciate your enthusiasm here for sure. But that would be great. Yeah, if you are headed up this way, let us know at some point, and we'll hope to have you back on the program. And a live show would be great too.
Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah, we can all
we've
sit in the
done
same room and chat.
Yeah.
We're trying to
Great.
figure out a way. Well, I know we're just said goodbye and now we keep talking. I think we're trying to figure out a kind of a way to do a live show. One of our friends was going to do a Facebook Live event where they actually went out in the woods and went
Oh.
to some Sasquatch areas and UFO areas. So something like that appeals to me. It's just I'm not sure the technology. I'd have to be schooled up on that. But yeah, maybe we could do that with you.
That would be a blast. Oh yeah, I'm down for that. I was up in Washington. Here we go. We keep talking about it. I was up in Washington a few summers ago. I went to East City Ranch. You know, James Gilliland. Yeah,
been
that
there.
was quite an experience. I did a video on it. It's on my YouTube channel about my trip up there and who I was with and seeing orbs and ships, and it was a magical place. But yeah, that was the last time I was up in your neck of the woods. But it's beautiful up there. It's incredible.
Yeah,
Love
that's and you're welcome to, I don't know why you'd want to, but you're welcome to join this. We have something called the Olympia 14 Society, and some of
Oh.
us who tend to be kind of I don't know what you'd call investigative types. There's a property and it's really close to where Gilliland's ranch is. I'm not going to divulge where.
Yeah,
but
don't.
close,
Yeah.
really close there that we're looking into, because it's like a paranormal Disneyland. So yeah, that would be cool.
We'll have to chat, because I have a friend who lives up there, like I said, and she would probably want to be a part of this too. So we'll chat. We'll chat some more, guys.
The more the merrier.
I
Karen,
agree.
take care.
You guys take care. Thank you again. Many blessings to you guys.
Thanks.
Stay
You too,
out of the
Karen.
heat.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Karen.